Well, I guess important for everybody to know is that I am what's called a recovering codependent. And so a codependent is someone who expects the people around them to provide the happiness for them. They don't know how to figure out how to get that without another person giving them something. And so that's something that in previous relationships was really hard for me. If someone didn't show me enough love, then I felt unworthy, I felt unwanted. And so I really didn't have a lot of self-love. I didn't view myself as an important or valuable person. And so because of that, I allowed myself to get into relationships where people were able to not only take advantage of me, but abuse me. And abuse can come in lots of different forms. It doesn't have to be just physical. And in fact, one of the most detrimental forms of abuse is emotional or psychological abuse. And so in previous relationships, I underwent a lot of emotional abuse, and it created a lot of trauma. And so talking to a counselor, he kind of brought up the whole codependency thing, and then also talked to me about the fact that if I was ever going to have a different relationship with somebody else or even with myself, I needed to start within myself. And so one thing about me is I do bodybuilding. It's something I love, I'm very passionate about, but it's not just the physical aspect that I love. It's taught me that there are things, if you want to achieve them, you have to do the hard work. It's not just going to be given to you. And when you work on yourself, great things can happen. So physically, yeah, I work on myself. I go to the gym, I eat right, I do all those things, but mentally and emotionally, those are the things that are actually harder to do, because you can really ignore your feelings. You can push them down, you can pretend like they're not there. Physically, I mean, you can see how you look, right? If you gain weight, you're like, oh, there it is. But emotionally and spiritually and psychologically, you're able to hide a lot of things. So you look happy, that's why depression is hard to spot sometimes. During previous relationships, I was very depressed. I had a lot of self-hate, and so for me, I knew I didn't want to hate myself anymore. I really wanted to love myself. And I will say, I'm not where I want to be yet, but this is a journey, and I have realized some really cool things about myself. For one, I have weaknesses. Yes, that's cool. That is cool because I believe that we are able to see our weaknesses so that we can make them strong. So if we don't see where the cracks in our own being are, then there's no way to feel like we can improve upon ourselves. And so, as I went through some recent trials in my life, I realized that there were things that allowed me to have abusive relationships in my life. I was allowing myself to accept that as acceptable treatment. So I had to decide for myself that I was going to demand more. I had never known what a boundary was, and so I had it explained to me as it's a make or break. And so if someone does something, you walk away, you get out. That's something I never did before. I was a people pleaser. I always tried to say yes. I always tried to be the one that never hurt someone's feelings. But the more I thought about it, I didn't hurt their feelings, but who was suffering? Well, I was. I was being broken down all the time. I didn't view myself as important enough to be treated well. And so going through recent trials, actually, my mom was one of the biggest supporters. She started doing a lot of research on codependency and the relationship that I was in, and she advised me to do a lot of research and a lot of healing. It's one of those things when you have trauma, you have to decide that you're going to take control of it. And so doing things like finding someone to talk to, trying different types of therapy, going to a counselor and making sure that if you do need, for me, I did EMDR, which is a type of, it's like tapping or rhythm therapy basically, but it helps to reprogram the brain. And so I did a combination of that, different energy work. So for me, because I knew I wanted to get better, I was willing to at that point do whatever it takes. Just like within bodybuilding, if I want to do well on stage, I've got to do whatever it takes to push myself in the gym, to make sure my food is right on point. And it's the same way with your emotional and spiritual being. If you want to see growth, you have to put in the hard work. It's not just going to be handed to you. So that was something important to me, that I had to do the work. No one was going to be able to do it for me.
Okay.
And so taking that in my own control was actually very empowering. I'm also teaching my children that feeling emotion is good, that there's no such thing as a bad emotion. You should acknowledge how you feel. You should be able to kind of own it and then process through it. So even emotions like anger and hate, which were things that I felt a lot of coming out of previous relationships, it wasn't a bad thing. It was good. It taught me, for one, what I would or would not accept in another relationship.
Right.
And so, I was able to feel those. I had my counselor tell me to lean into the emotion. So don't shy away from it. Don't pull back and think, oh, that's bad. I'm a bad person if I feel angry. No, lean into it, feel it, embrace all of it, and then process through it. Because I knew I didn't want to stay angry. I didn't want to stay bitter. I didn't want to stay hateful. I wanted to move past it and become a happy person. And so that really hit me when he said, lean into those emotions, actually feel them and acknowledge, I feel angry. I feel hate and feel the ugly parts that you feel like, you know what, that's a scary emotion. Yeah. And then decide, okay, I do feel that, that's okay, but I'm not going to stay there. I'm going to do something about it. Yeah. So that was really empowering to me to realize that emotions were not scary, they were not bad. Yeah. Because even in childhood, I had trauma happen to me that made it so that I was very afraid to talk about things that had happened to me. I was in a situation when I was very young that made it so that I did not trust adults and I did not trust being heard. And so being able to now tell people how I've overcome things almost empowers my little 7-year-old Meg or 3-year-old Meg to speak out, to talk about abuse, to, for one, acknowledge that I was abused. That's a big thing, because even victims will say, well, it wasn't bad. It wasn't that bad. Well, yeah, it was that bad. Yeah. It was, because you went through it. It changed your soul. It changed how you view life. It hurt you. And it's okay to say, I was abused. I was a victim. I no longer am. I am going to take control of my life and create my own happiness. And that's something that I've done with my kids is we are creating a life that we feel good about, where we are happy and we can define our own happiness. So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hey, I love it. So what things are you working on to help other people to overcome their obstacles and reach their goals?
One thing is I'm pretty vocal about what happened in my relationship, how that affected me, and then I am very vocal about the research that I've done and how to heal. There are so many resources on the internet, so many coaches like yourself who have knowledge of different types of traumatic abuse, that is mental, emotional, physical, doesn't matter, there are resources available. And the more we're able to talk about it as victims, the more you can realize you can move past it. And when I say talk about it, I don't mean talk about, oh, they were so terrible, they did this and this and this. It's no, I was in this situation. It was really terrible. I felt these things. I went through these things, and that way you can move past it rather than staying in victim mode. Poor me. And I did that for a long time. I stayed in, how could this happen to me? Oh, things are so terrible. But then it got to the point where I was like, okay, it happened. This was exactly what I thought it was. But now, because I know I have tools, I have done the research and I share those things with other women and men. Men are abused as well. So I share things like how to cope with very toxic people in your life. Most of my relationships were very toxic. people, were able to manipulate me very easily. I was very gullible. And now I look for those red flags that I'm like, you know what? I don't think I want to be in this relationship. Whether it's a friendship or, an intimate relationship, if I see something that to me now is unacceptable, I leave. And I'm okay now with doing that. Before, I felt bad because I was being mean.
Right.
But I had to decide who is more important in this situation. Yes, they will find someone who can take care of them and love them. That's not my job. That's not my responsibility. My responsibility is to love and protect myself and love and protect my children. And I can't do that if I'm not strong in myself. So talking to other women and empowering them to say, okay, do the research. And when you are in a toxic relationship, learn how to get out. It's one of those things where when you're in a relationship like that, you don't even know, for one, that you're there. And then for another, you don't know how to get out. It feels impossible. So getting the tools in place to be able to say, I am a strong woman, I am a strong person, man, doesn't matter, and I can do this by myself, or I can be alone. It's going to be okay. That's very important. I remember kind of going through the last several years, there was one moment when I pray, that's kind of what I do. And I just remember hearing in my head, you need to get good at being alone. And for a codependent, that is terrifying. We don't do well being alone, right? We need someone around all the time. But as I embraced being alone, it actually was a chance for me to discover who I was. And so I tell other women, I'm like, you know what? Don't get into a relationship right now. One of the best things that you can do is take time to get to know yourself again. You need to know who you are and learn to love that person. If you're Christian, we believe in the 10 Commandments, right? So one of the most important is love thy neighbor as thyself. So keyword there, thyself. So if you don't love yourself, you can't love anybody else. And so that was something that really struck me when I was going through my healing process, was I have to learn to love myself. I am still learning how. There's moments when definitely I get down on myself and I'm like, oh man, if only I could do this, if only I were this way. I'm very much a perfectionist, so if I'm not perfect, it's like, I give up, But you have to decide that just like anything, it is a process, and you have to learn to love the process of learning to love yourself. So that's what I share with other people, is that it's not going to happen overnight. You're not going to heal overnight, but it is possible. It's very possible. And I would say the people that have been around me for the last couple of years, as I've gone through my healing process, would tell you that it is night and day from who I was to who I am. And that's pretty exciting for me, because that's what my kids are going to see. And that's really important to me.
Wow. Okay. That's good. That's good. A lot of good info. So if someone wants to, after they see this, connect with you, or meet up with you, or just get some more information from you, how do they find you?
The best way I would say is honestly on Facebook. I've had a lot of people actually, from posts that I've made, contact me through Facebook Messenger. I respond, especially if you mention this post immediately. I'm going to do what I can to help you as well. So Facebook is a great way. I am at Planet Fitness, so I'm the trainer here. So come work out with me. But in the meantime, kind of get to know my personality and decide. You've got to be able to trust someone if you're going to reach out for help. I encourage you to be guarded until you feel comfortable. That's important, because you have to create boundaries. But Facebook, I am on Instagram. My Facebook name is Meg Herbert. My Instagram name is Meg Herbert, Swedish Herbert, with underscores in between each word. So yes. And then those are probably the best ways. As far as social media goes, that's how you get a hold of me. But by all means, if you if you're going through something and you're not sure how to cope with it, how to deal with it, how to heal from it, or how to get out of it, I would be more than happy to share my experience, the research that I've done, and how I've been able to work through my healing process and the resources that I've come across to do that.
Awesome. Well, we all go through trials and tribulations, and the reason I feel we go through those things is so that we can help others that are going through the same thing. So, love you guys. Like this, share it. If you know anyone that can use her experience and can benefit from meeting up with Meg, let us know. Okay? Thank you, Meg. You're awesome.
You bet.
Love you guys. Peace.